Hello, everyone, and welcome to my reading of Fate's Strange Fake, Volume 4. So, it's been a little bit since we read Volume 3. I might need some reminders as to what's going on just because, I'm not reading these back to back because I would go crazy. But we're going to continue on. Thankfully, by the way, this is structured. It should not really be an issue because it's all kind of fragmented and it's a narrator that does some really great stuff with it, so I shouldn't have too many issues. But it's looking like Flat is a main character, which is exciting. So we'll learn about him with his Jack the Ripper. I almost called it a persona. I almost called it a stand. It's called a servant. So let's see here. Fate's Strange Fake. So we have extra chapter blank. Okay, Interlude, Remembrance of the Commonplace. I shouldn't read these probably. The Boy Who Does Not Believe in God. That's a pretty strong title though. Oh, and we have this, of course. So let me just pop this open. Okay, it's not translated, I'm noticing. But that's okay. That's actually probably for the best. Flat Waver, the servant of Jack the Ripper with the knife clock thing. I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are. And we have the two different Pravadis, right? Parvati? No, how do you say their name? Prevlati? I'll need to remind myself. Okay, then we have little baby soldier man and the assassin. This is very, very low quality art, but that's okay, because in the grand scheme of things, the writing is what matters. So, let us get started here. I guess we should actually, rotate the page to be the right way. All right, here we go with blank is the chapter. So, give up, dear. That child is too much for us. He won't advance our family's magecraft. He'll destroy us all. Are you telling me that child is what we get for putting up with the clock tower's ridicule for nearly 2 millennia? The clock tower might change its mind, true, but anyone can see they're going to crush us. Still, I'm sure that child will survive. He'll be the only one. Why was that child even born? Is he even ours? No, I know, I'm sorry. You did everything you could to verify it scientifically and mystically. You proved that he's ours beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know it. I still can't believe it. I'd have an easier time accepting if you told me that there were still fairies and we'd be saddled with a changeling. That's, those of you who don't know, a changeling is like when a fairy comes and steals your baby and then replaces them with a little gremlin. Yeah. You know, don't you? Our family tackled that research problem 300 years ago, ultimately judged it impossible and stored it away. That child completed it at the age of 8. Oh, no verbalization, no reproducibility. He just felt his way through it intuitively. Yes, I suppose you're right. You can't call it complete without reproducibility. I know, dear, but still, okay, are these Flat's parents? I'm scared. That child frightens me. Him being a gifted mage ought to make us proud. But it doesn't, it's wrong. He doesn't make sacrifices. At first I thought he had too much kindness for a mage, that he was defective, but he's not even that. His purpose is fundamentally different. It's like finding out the tube you thought was a telescope was actually the barrel of a cannon. He's something different. So dear, I've been wondering, could our mission as mages be put an end to that child? Wait, could our mission as mages be to put an end to that child? What? I think that putting an end to him might be the culmination of the Escardos family magecraft. What the frick? Well, dear, it's time to prepare ourselves. That boy is no child of ours. He's nobody, nothing. Just a phenomenon that slipped in from some other world. We just got it in our heads that he was our son and named him. There was never a child called Flat. Just a flat expanse with some unintelligible scribbles on it. Isn't that right? Oh, I always thought his name being Flat was weird. Like, it felt like a name that worked like blank, and yeah, that's what it is. It's literally like an underscore. Oh. Flat Escardos. When they learned of his existence and his singular nature, two men oddly expressed exactly the same thought. One was an ancient mage called the Devil of the financial world. The other was a magician who conquered the jewel-studded kaleidoscope sky. Oh, that's just freaking... Oh. That's, you know his name. Why can't I think of it right now? The one with the kaleidoscope craft essence. Why can't I think of his name right now? You know who I'm talking about, though. We talked about him earlier. He was in this earlier. He was the one who met Arquid. Why can't I think of his name? Okay, wait. First magician fate. I can't believe I'm growing senile, right? Wait, was he the first one? Okay. No, I need the names of the magicians in Fate. I'm so mad that I actually can't remember. Zelrech! Yes. Why couldn't I think of that? I'm growing senile. My brain kept saying Zephia. That's a different guy. Although separated in time and space, both praise not the boy, but his ancestor in the same words. I see, you've finally done it. You've achieved the 1,800-year dream of the Escardos family, which even your descendants have forgotten. Ancient mage called the Devil of the financial world. I don't know who that is. That I've never heard of. My only thought about this is I do know that Flat has relation to the casino vampire, but I don't think that's this case. I don't think, at least. We'll have to see. Okay. Interesting. So his parents hate him and want to kill him, but Zelrech and an ancient mage praise him. Okay. Interlude. The membrane of the Commonplace. Okay. Next, the weather. Low pressure in West Las Vegas. Ordinarily, news flowed out of the TV. The townspeople, glad and depressed by the turns of the upcoming weather, went about their business. The city of Snowfield was not panicking yet. The 7-day Holy Grail War, a jumble of mages, an unofficial U.S. military group, and agents of the Holy Church, had begun the moment 13 heroic spirits were assembled. On the morning of its second day, they were still enjoying the peace the world had given them. The facade, however, was beginning to tear in a visible way. The glass pipeline explosion in the desert, the numerous pets suffering from an unknown illness brought to veterinary hospitals, the people brought into psychiatric wards by their families who complained they did not want to leave town, the destruction of the historic opera house, the terrorist attack on the police station, apparently with the objective of releasing the criminals held there, the aftermath which spilled over into an adjacent hotel, the sudden violent gusts of wind that blew in from the north of Snowfield to Crystal Hill, a skyscraper in the city center. A number of incidents had taken place in the city, but they were not yet enough to destroy the daily lives of those who did not directly encounter them. At times, the common sense they had built up over the course of their lives paralyzed their senses. This side of panic, that common sense, formed a membrane around people's daily lives that narrowly prevented them from seeing the oncoming madness. Or perhaps many of them had already noticed, but were trying to cling to a sense of security by feigning otherwise. Not yet. It's still okay. It's not broken yet. The city's still in one piece. I'm sure things will be back to normal soon. The membrane was filling up with wish after baseless wish that it would be so. That was why the people who sensed that somehow something was out of the ordinary felt happy, not uneasy. Happy that they were still in a full place. Happy that they were still this side of the border that separated the normal from the abnormal. That is not to say the people of Snowfield were entirely optimistic. The city had been under the influence... the city had been, built up over the course of 80 years for the fake Holy Grail War. Every part of it was under the influence of obliquely inscribed suggestion. Magecraft in the positions of public buildings and streets, billboards, and roadside trees, which individually would appear as mere signs even to the average mage. like the color scheme of a scientific domain designed to produce a specific psychological effect. It was a form of suggestion that begins to function only when many layered elements are brought together, which seeped into the bodies of the residents. Accurately measuring the suggestion would require the combined effort of a mage in command of superior powers of observation and one who, like Lord Elmoy II, possessed the skill of assembling clues from anything and everything. That was what made it possible for the masterminds to conceal for so long the fact that the entire city of Snowfield was under the influence of a gigantic, vague suggestion that would prevent panic, up to a point. That was how they kept it from passing mages, from sociologists suspicious of the city's rapid development, and from the residents who continued to lead their lives there. This was why, when animal after animal collapsed, fear that the disease might spread to humans had been kept to a minimum. And so, the townspeople remained ignorant as they greeted the morning of the second day, unaware even of the fact that they themselves, perhaps the city itself, were a grand sacrifice on the altar of the fake Holy Grail War. Suggestion, however, can only do so much. If the membrane, the sense of security it cast, was stretched too tight, it would eventually reach its limits. The masterminds did not care. They supposed that if the membrane of suggestion reached the point of tearing, they would already be beyond the power of ordinary residents to resist. Those of them who were particularly anxious to keep Magecraft secret considered that it would be better for the uproar to vanish in an instant like a firework than to grow slowly. In short, the townspeople were not even allowed to panic. Orlando Reeve, the chief of police, bore fresh witness to the fact that he listened to the information streaming from the TV. "A mage's mage," he muttered disgustingly to himself, eyes narrowed, "is no different from a hard-working corrupt politician." What about me? He wondered as soon as the words were out of his mouth. As long as corruption stayed hidden, it was difficult for the public to tell the difference between a corrupt politician and an honest one, in which case mages, who never entered the public eye to begin with, probably ought to be lumped in with them. There were exceptions, but from the standpoint of the general public, mages were generally evil. Orlando was conscious that he was not one of those exceptions as he listened to the voices emanating from his office TV. It was a news program on a local station based in Snowfield. In the brief period before the next battle, the police chief, who was also a mage on the side of the masterminds, listened carefully and in silence to the stream of information, as if regretting that the announcer's calm voice would eventually fail. Our next story, the environmental effects of the gas explosion in southern Snowfield, blah 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 blah. Chapter 10. That was a nice little, just reminder of what's going on. Chapter 10. Separate Mornings, Separate Pasts. 1. All right. Back with Ayaka. When Ayaka Seijo woke up, her mind was in the midst of distant scenery. It was not as if there was anything interesting to look at. She was racing across a level plain. She could see a forest in the distance. She seemed to be riding a horse. She could see an armored hand gripping its reins. A dream? She realized that the hands on the reins were not hers. She then realized that she could not move. Her view, however, was rapidly shifting. She guessed that she was sharing someone else's point of view. She supposed that there were dreams like that. Despite Ayaka's best efforts to convince herself otherwise, however, the dream seemed awfully real. "Richard!" a voice called out. "Hey, Richard!" Ayaka's view spun around. There were more than a dozen armored men on horses behind her. One of them was riding his horse closer. Once the horse had come to a stop in full view, its young armored rider said, "We came as you said, Richard, but do you seriously intend to search for it? The legacy of King Arthur?" "Of course." She, Richard, answered the man's question. "I finally have a clue." Ayaka experienced the strange sensation of words slipping out of her mouth even though she was not saying anything. "You mean the drunken minstrel's gossip?" "Exactly. Truth is cleverly hidden deep within the tales minstrels spin when they're sober. I, however, haven't got the knack of deciphering it. They say that when they've lost their senses, the things they say when they've lost their senses are much easier to understand." It was an absurd argument. Ayaka was shocked that such nonsense had come out of her mouth. The way of speaking, however, told her all she needed to know. Oh, this must be They're calling me Richard. My saber? Ayaka finally figured it out. The outlandishness of the dream made her want to sigh. The conversation, however, was proceeding matter-of-factly, without regard for her feelings. He only said it was something to do with King Arthur. We don't actually know what. We have time on our hands, so it's all the same to us, but you're royalty. What is it you want so badly? Oh, anything. What? Well, Excalibur would be best, but I wouldn't mind Caliburn, or Rongominiad, or even the shields he's said to have used in the slaying of the Chapaloo. Is that, Pridewind? Own Pridewind? I think so. If I end up finding the entrance to Avalon and manage to catch a glimpse of the great king or himself, I'm not used to saying himself, and I'm not used to it. If I end up finding the entrance to Avalon and manage to catch a glimpse of the great king himself or his mage, that alone would make my life worthwhile. The voice of the man, who seemed to be Richard, rang out innocently. The young man beside him gave a wry smile. If the legends are true, wouldn't Excalibur be at the bottom of a lake in Vivian's arms? Then I shall find the Lady of the Lake and win her friendship. You know, they say Sir Peleus exchanged vows with one of them and survived Camlin Hill. Wasn't he a stray knight that they don't even count as part of the Round Table? He just saw his chance and ran. Anyway, looking for heirlooms of a hero who might not even really exist, might not have really existed, isn't something that royalty should be seen to personally. Sure, there are no royals or commoners, surely there are no royals or commoners when it comes to admiring a great legend. Somehow, Saber seemed more childish than usual. I wonder why. They called him royalty, but the people around him acted more like good friends than vassals, and Richard didn't seem to mind one bit. If we do manage to find King Arthur's treasure, it'll mean that all those legends were true. We can prove that those dazzling chansons de guest really happened on the ground we stand on. It's songs of dazzling songs of valor or whatever, yeah. We've inherited the land the King of Knights and his men galloped over. That would be enough for me to accept my destiny. So if they didn't exist, you'll never be able to accept it? You never say anything reasonable. The friend shrugged exasperatedly. How do you say that? Exasperatedly atop his horse. What's next? You're gonna lead us on a quest on a grail quest? That's probably a fool's errand. Why? What makes it any different from Excalibur or Rongominiad? Chrétien told me. The grail isn't something you obtain just by seeking it. It chooses its possessor. The Knights of the Round Table who are questing after it only managed to reach it because the current of destiny called the Holy Grail sought them out. So you can't seek the grail of your own choosing. I'm sure that, if I continue to pursue knightly glory, a fitting reason will eventually present itself. Richard held forth on fairy tales with an air of perfect seriousness. The proper noun he used prompted a response from his friend. Chrétien, is it? Rumor does make him a degraded remnant of the druids who peered into the past. Oh, it's true that some poets like him and Vase sing tales of the King of Knights and his Round Table so vividly, and as almost nostalgically, as if they'd seen the events themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me there were fairies who lived for 1,000 years. Well, it wouldn't matter. It wasn't Chrétien you ended up getting your clue to Arthur's legacy from. It was a drunken poet whose name you don't even know in a city tavern. Can't fathom why you believe his tall tales. I'm happy with any clue. I'm not a king yet. It's important that I study the King of Knights' footprints while I'm free, don't you think? Ayaka could see them from her point of view. Richard's eyes were probably shining. Could not see, rather. She could see his childlike expression in her mind's eye as her attention shifted with Richard's viewpoint to the plain. Then she saw something strange. Well, you're free. You're practically the Lord of Aquitaine already. Where's that? What is Aquitaine? Is that like a region or something? I'm looking it up. What is that? It's a French region. Okay. Situated southwest of metropolitan France. It's kind of by the ocean. Yeah. Southwest. Okay. Very interesting. What is it, Richard? Something's coming. There was a dot on the flat plain. The cloud of dust rising behind it, however, announced that it was rushing toward them. At first, Aika thought it was a horse galloping across the open plains, but it was the wrong size. Before long, a thunderous noise that seemed to be coming from it reached them, and the knights around her began to panic. What is it? A giant boar? It's always frickin' giant boars, man. A carriage? No. There are no horses. I've never seen anything like that. Does that thing have legs? How does it run? If it's a beast, I've never heard a bray like that. Look, it's coming this way. What speed? Run, Richard! Richard ignored his companions, who began to pull on their reins. Fascinating. His voice sounded calm. Oh my god. It could be a descendant of Twith. We learned about him very recently in FGO. More words I don't know. I do this time. I forgot how to pronounce it already, though. Still, Aika did not feel particularly nervous. That was partly due to the assurance in Richard's voice. Oh, I guess I should say, for those who don't know, that was like a crazy demon boar that King Arthur fought. Mostly, however, it was because she recognized the thing making its way toward them, though its shape was a little different from the modern version she was familiar with. The thing was gradually decelerating as it approached Richard. After a few more bestial roars, it came to a complete stop several meters in front of Richard. What is it? The man who remained at Richard's side until the end stared suspiciously at that thing. He probably meant to put himself in between it and Richard if the need arose. A carriage made of iron. Its wheels... I'm sorry, was there a car? What are we doing? What are we doing? A car? Its wheels are quite thick. And what's that black stuff? Some kind of leather. Hearing the curiosity in Richard's voice, Aika had a sudden realization. Oh, I get it. This must be when Richard was alive. Right? If that was the case, she could understand their funny way of speaking. Aika also decided that what she was seeing must be a dream after all. What a weird dream. I mean, everyone's speaking Japanese. If this was really the world of the past, then the thing sitting in front of Richard and his friends would be totally impossible. Its body was decorated with steampunk gears, gothic-looking iron barbs, and giving a gaudy and twisted silhouette. Aika knew what it was called. Oh my god, what are we doing? A car. It must be custom. What? I'm sorry, why is there a car in let me just double check. King Richard France? When was he? It was the year. Yeah, here we go. Okay, it's a bit later than I thought, but basically the year 1200. Little earlier than cars should normally be there, so interesting. Okay. Confronted with an automobile that looked straight out of an action movie, Aika wondered what mental state she was in to produce this dream. Well, I've been mixed up with knights and kings ever since I crossed the desert in a snowfield, so I guess I've got my time periods all mixed up. As Aika considered, the situation in front of her began to change. A banging sound started up inside of the car's door. The knights warily drew their swords and surrounded the vehicle. The next instant, the apparently poorly fitted door was kicked open from the inside, and a man emerged. Then the car's windows opened one by one to reveal things that resembled musical instruments, which began to play a twisted, cacophonous tune. Against this backdrop of noise, a cheerful voice rang out. "Hello, young manager of Aquitaine," and wait, no, I'm not going to call it Aquitaine because that's the Hunger Force. Aquitaine, right? How do you say that? I should know how to say it. How to pronounce Aquitaine? It's Aquitaine?
Aquitaine.
It's Aquitaine. Okay. Well, no, that's his American pronunciation. Give me the British one.
Aquitaine.
Aquitaine. Okay, no, it's Aquitaine. Okay. Young manager of Aquitaine and your merry companions. How are you? I'm doing fine, but I surrender. Giving up and all that. So maybe could you put away those swords for now? The man who delivered this easygoing speech with both hands in the air was dressed to rival, or even surpass his car in sheer outlandishness. He wore gaudy nobleman's clothes, which coloring made him look more like a court jester than royalty. An odd hat was perched atop his head. The gears that adorned the stick in his hand and turned with distorted noise, presumably due to the workings of some kind of mechanism. The sight made Ayaka certain that this was, after all, a dream. Anything else she had seen seemed like an aesthetically unified world. She'd wonder if she maybe been getting a genuine glimpse into the era when knights had fought on horseback, but this man's sudden appearance had spoiled the effect in a way that seemed simply ridiculous. "What's this?" the bizarre man continued to the knights who had yet to lower their swords. "Don't you know the words peace and love? Raising both hands is a token of surrender. Or is it the culture of this period? I could wave a white flag if you like. Well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm unarmed, non-hostile. In fact, I have the utmost respect for you. You accepted the trap I set without hesitation and even came all the way out to this empty field." "A trap?" "Oh, damn. I went on and blurted out that I arranged for the drunken poet in the tavern on all my own. Well, it's no big deal. After all, you did show up here, so my plan was a success. I've done it." Who is this? At the man's words, the knights tightened their grips on their swords and began to tighten their circle. The clownish man shrugged. "Now wait a minute," he said, thumping his stick on his own shoulder. "Try to be a bit more broad-minded. Even the likes of Alexander III decided to get some fun out of it when a novel, striking, and eccentric figure like me popped up before his eyes." Oh my god, is this what I think it is? I'm gonna keep reading. "Enough nonsense!" Wait. Ayaka saw Richard's arm atop the irate knights. What's this about Alexander the Great? "Richard, listening to a suspicious fellow like this, he is not the king of knights whom I adore." Richard addressed the strange man while restraining the friend who tried to stop him with one hand. "But if you name the great king of conquerors by way of comparison, I must hear you out, whatever tall tale you may have for me. Isn't that correct?" Richard then crossed his arms before the eccentric and declared with an air of dignity, "You may continue. First," oh my god, I just read his name. "Who exactly are you? Oh my god, are you serious?" The mystery man grinned cheerfully, clambered up onto his custom car so he was looking down on the knights, and sang out his name in a clearful voice. "Admirable listening! My name is Saint Germain. Saint Germain. I don't mind if you pause at Saint, but relax and run it together. Saint Germain. Yes, Saint Germain. The hedonist by the name Saint Germain has now appeared before a great future king. This is cause for celebration. Or at least to me. Oh my god, was he real? I thought he was a thing that was made up for Castlevania. Was he real? Are you serious? European adventurer, the Count of Saint Germain, whose real name and origins are unknown. Oh my god, he's real. Oh, he's like a spiritualism thing? Oh, yeah, that'd be it. Wow, okay. Yeah, I didn't know he was real. That's pretty cool. Okay. Alright. "You dare stand above Richard knowing he's royalty?" Some of Richard's companions shouted, but they were not exactly furious. They likely understood that Richard did not place much importance on his own status. Well, all the knights here were talking casually to him too, Ayaka was thinking, when she overheard Richard murmuring something as he looked up at the man making a speech on top of his car. Oh, that makes quite a picture. Thinking back to what Richard had looked like when he had started making a speech on top of the police car, Ayaka decided that she was having this dream because of the ridiculous act had left a strong impression. The realization did not help her wake up. "And?" Richard's voice rang loud and clear in her eardrums. "What is Saint Germain to me?" At that, with another shout of admirable listening, the man who called himself Saint Germain struck an exaggerated pose and began to speak. "I will be a signpost on your quest to trace the stories of past heroes, an advisor to help you scent ruin, a prophet who announces the end, and at times perhaps a dove with the branch of hope clutched in its beak. That is the role the man called Saint Germain will play for you." You're too greedy. In short, a court mage, am I right? Regrettably, I am no mage, nor am I a fairy, an incubus, a hematophage, a traveler backwards in time, or a world-hopping magician. I am merely an aristocrat and a swindler. The man who called himself Saint Germain twirled his stick magnificently as he went on. There is, therefore, no need for you to remember my name. I don't mind if you forget it immediately. I'll introduce myself again. I'm Saint Germain. Saint Germain, a name you can't you might as well forget. Yes, Saint Germain. Saint Germain. The name isn't important. That's the man called Saint Germain. Saint or Germain. Oh my god, he's way younger than I thought. Sorry, that's Sabo. That's just Sabo. I thought he'd be a twirling mustache villain guy. What the frick? Saint Germain is Sabo? Okay, I guess it's Sabo. All right. Come on, Richard. Hurry and shut him up. Richard did not move, ignoring his companions, who were brandishing their swords again. Right. Wait, if you are a swindler, I'd like to hear how you plan to hoodwink me. I could not see it, but somehow she knew that Richard's eyes were sparkling like a child's. Ha ha! I'm not the one who's going to fool you. Faced with the world you're about to set foot in, the myriad of mysteries that birthed King Arthur, you'll try to fool yourself. I'm just here to assist in that grand fraud. What I mean to say is, best regards, if nothing else, a toast to this momentous occasion on which you walk into legend. Saint Germain got down from the roof of his car, kneeled reverently, and stared fixedly up at Richard's face. Their eyes met. Before Aika had time to think, Saint Germain's lips moved. And to you, behind the eyes, my everlasting best. A shiver ran down Aika's spine. Instinctively, she knew. The man's last words had not been directed at Richard, but at Aika herself sharing his vision. And as if to prove it, Saint Germain followed them up. Still, you've heard of with a sentence that would make no sense to anyone but her. I presume you are peeping from the future, you lifelong stray child. At that point, Aika woke up. Her eyes focused on a gray ceiling, and she realized she was lying on a bed. Her back and palms were slightly sweaty. She could feel her heart beating fast. Oh, Aika, you're awake. You must be exhausted to fall asleep with your glasses on. Turning in the direction of the familiar voice, she saw Saber sitting in a chair beside the bed and reading a book. More books, which probably had come from a nearby shelf, lay on the table in front of him. The book in his hands at the moment was called The Life and Death of King John. Is that a real book? Is that a real book? I'm going to type it in. Is that a real book? Life and Death of King John. Oh, it's Shakespeare. I should probably know that. I did spend yesterday getting dragged all over the place by a certain someone. Aika groused, barely noticing it. If you've recovered enough to abuse me, I've nothing to worry about. Still, you ought to rest a little longer for safety's sake. It's not dawn yet. Thanks, and sorry. I didn't mean to grumble. Aika was disgusted with herself for speaking so sarcastically to someone who had helped her out of so many scrapes. You've nothing to apologize for, Saber replied with a cheerful smile. It's true that I dragged you around, and I'll probably go on doing so. Besides, girls who wake up in a bad mood are lovelier. You're certainly positive. At that point, Aika remembered the dream she just had. She remembered it quite clearly for a dream. Was it really a dream? Her instincts said no, but she was afraid to confirm it. Still, there are mountains of books in this house. Nothing but spell books in the basement, but there are heaps of histories and novels on the second floor. Hero tales, too. I won't get bored. When she saw Saber, his eyes sparkling with excitement, she supposed he had been reading all night, Aika could not keep quiet. Hey. Yes, what is it? Do you know anyone called Saint Germain? Aika was on the verge of asking, but she froze up before she could get the words out. She remembered the strange man's eyes as she had seen them at the end of the dream, and felt frightened to bring up his name herself. Aika decided to try a different proper noun from the dream instead. I love the idea of proper nouns. I'm very happy we're going with that phrasing for it, because yeah, that's what it is. It was a name she did not know, so her idea was to see that whether Saber recognized it would settle it if it had been an ordinary dream or not. Hey, do you know someone named, like, I think it was Chrétien de Troyes? Troy? Troy. It'd be Troy. Chrétien, literally Christian of Troy is what it is, but that takes me back. He was a troubadour at the court of my sister Marie. He recited the legend of the Grail to me more times than I could stand. Sorry, I didn't mean to lie, but I just told an untruth. I had badgered him into reciting the Grail quest for me hundreds of times, but I never got sick of it. I bet he did, though. Aika's usual half-exasperated attitude towards Saber took precedence over her surprise that the conversation was proceeding smoothly. Still, you've heard of Chrétien? Are you a fan of the Knights of the Round Table too, Ayaka? Aren't they wonderful? Chrétien always told me that they were twisted people. Yeah, they kind of are. However, they were as knights, but that's just what makes the Round Table the best. Ayaka was not at all well informed on the Knights of the Round Table, though she vaguely remembered the name. Based on the light with which she saw Saber talk about them, however, she was ready to accept that they must really be great heroes. His talk also gave Ayaka a chance to think calmly. In other words, that wasn't just a dream, was it? Certainly, now that she had thought back on it, it had less felt like a dream than it had been like being shown a first-person scene in a film. If that was the case, there must have been some kind of mystical action. She considered consulting Saber about her dream just to make sure. Just then, however, there came an untimely knock on the door. May I let them in, Ayaka? Saber asked, closing his book at the same time. I'll leave it to your judgment. I've got no choice but to trust it anyway. Saber carefully scrutinized her face, always remaining alert to events on the other side of the door, and nodded. As far as I can see, you don't have bed hair or sleep sand, and your clothes are in order. It should be fine. Huh? Yeah, it's fine, I guess. Okay. Hello out there, Saber called at the door. You may come in. The knob turned, and the antique door swung slowly open. Did you manage to get some sleep? In the doorway stood a young man whose face looked young enough to be called a boy. He was dressed from the neck down in mostly black outfit reminiscent of Special Forces uniform, which made a disconcerting contrast with his youthful features. Sigma, right? I can't get over that name, Ayaka asked, keeping a wary eye on his holstered gun and knife. In place of an answer, the youth made a dispassionate statement of fact. His house is already surrounded. At the same time, in a cheap motel. A motel built on an unfrequented road. The skyscrapers of the city center were visible in the distance. Near the motel, however, there were still a few buildings worthy of the name. It was the kind of place you would expect to see warehouses of abandoned materials. Still, even taking all that into account, even considering that it was before dawn, there were too few cars and pedestrians to be seen. It was as if time had stopped. In that stillness, human figures appeared, seeming to ooze out of the darkness. 9 men and women who looked out of place in their somber suits. Scan complete, one of them reported to the man in the center. There are no traces of a ward or of magecraft being used nearby, and no signs of the magical energy being disturbed. Is this really the place? The report prompted the apparent leader to doubt. If their information was accurate, this place was the lair of a mage who belonged to the Clock Tower's infamous School of Modern Magecraft, commonly known as the El Malloy School. Was it possible that a personage of sufficient stature to be chosen as a master in the Holy Grail War was lounging around without a single ward in place? They're supposed to be up against a mage, not some poor civilian one who had mesmerized them into spying for them. The leader's long combat experience warned him that they could be walking into a trap. He cautiously revised his plan so that they could produce flawless results in the name of Zugzwang. In the name of what? Zugswain? Okay, well, they're gonna seemingly explain it. I see the word Igda Millennia. Oh, no. Oh, we're dealing with Fate Apocrypha stuff. Okay. Zugswain was a group of mages formed by the Enskaya family of Eastern Europe. They began as subordinate. Okay, so they were subordinates to the Igda Millennia. Okay. They were subordinates to the Romania-based Igda Millennia lineage, tasked with swiftly disposing of any vermin that came sniffing around their overlords. The power of Igda Millennia had withered more than 50 years previously. With the line dissolved, what is this a real word? Zugswaying? Is this a real thing? I'm just typing it in. Zugswaying. It's German. Compulsion to move. It means is a situation in chess or other turn-based games where one player is put at a disadvantage because of the obligation to make a move. Oh no! The concept of this is good to have a word for. It's basically like okay, a good example. You have to play a hand in Balatro, right? Or you have to. Okay, no better example. You're playing FGO. You have to do a move. You can't just waste a turn. There is no way to waste a turn. Zugzwang is that idea of you have to make a move. Okay, so how do you say that? How do you say Zugzwang? Would it be? Because it's again German. How do you say it?
For today,
okay,
let's learn how to pronounce this word, a German word.
Yeah, okay, please tell me.
Chess players.
Okay, just tell me.
Probably familiar with, but how do you
please
pronounce it?
Just tell me.
It's a situation in chess where a player is
yes, I learned about it. Okay, come on. Okay.
That'll be the most correct. Zugzwang.
Zugzwang. Okay, Zugzwang. Okay, easy enough. Zugzwang. I could do that. Anyways, with the line dissolved, Zugzwang had gone freelance, becoming an organization that handled all sorts of shady business. As mages, their skills were middling, but they garnered praise for the ruthless efficiency with which they carried out their work. By taking on a wide range of requests from clients, ranging from politicians to financiers with no knowledge of the world of mages and their factions, they just managed to keep their heads above water. Just. As enforcers, they commanded a high price. They were, however, still mages. They would need more than fees to indulge themselves. Then, opportunity had come knocking. A job offer that promised remuneration payback, an order of magnitude greater than they were used in addition to a job offer that promised remuneration an order of magnitude greater than they were used to, in addition to deeply interesting them as mages, had fallen unexpectedly into their laps. Steal a master's authority and join the Snowfield Grail War. Zugzwang had been suspicious at first. Their client, a wealthy mage, had shown them a vision through a familiar, a vision of a battle between two heroic spirits in the enormous crater it left behind, that had left them no choice but to believe. They were convinced that a wave was building in Snowfield that could shake the magical world. It was dangerous, but it was also a golden opportunity. They'd spent a day laying an information network across the city and had finally tracked down a master's hideout. They had no idea that the information they believed they had unearthed through their own abilities had been deliberately leaked by a man called Faldius. Zugzwang was about to silently walk into hell, unaware that, to the masterminds, they were foils to measure strength of their target, Flat Escardos. Start by confirming the target's position. Pawns 1 through... pawns... Okay, yeah, it's chess. Pawns 1 through 3 take the second floor of the motel. Pawns 4 through 6, the first floor. Pawns 7 and 8 will accompany me to the manager's office. Will use suggestion to get information from the manager, then dispose of them. Ditto for any witnesses. A magic crest is inherited through a lineage of mages. Zugzwang had deliberately split theirs. Half was embedded... Oh my god, it is chess. Half was embedded in their leader, called the King. The other half was further divided in 8 portions, one in the body of each of his subordinates called pawns. Ordinarily, a magic crest split into that many parts would only provide a slight boost to mystical power. Synchronizing all the pawn's crests with the king's, however, enabled the king to forcibly raise the pawn's ability at the same level as his, in exchange for drastically reducing the lifespans and the flexibility of their magic circuits. The king was about to bear the crest branded onto his arm in order to activate that peculiar spell when he saw it. Show the crests on your arms. I'm going to bring you up to my level. You know the drill. The man with his face was standing in the middle of the group, talking like he always did. What? His voice was raised, but none of the pawns turned to look at him. They must have been suffering from some kind of mystical interference, because they did not even seem to realize that he was here. In what seemed like nothing so much as an out-of-body experience, the king watched the man who had his face move exactly as he would have, pressing his arm against the arms of the pawns. This is bad. Stop. Don't touch arms with him! The king picked up on a faint current of magical energy, but not in time to shout a warning. Even if he had, would his voice have reached the pawns? Such doubts momentarily flashed through his head, and the man with his face spoke. 3, 2, 1. Commence the operation, or interrogation, rather. The next instant, the 8 pawns that had linked arms with him convulsed like they had been struck by lightning and collapsed in front of the motel entrance, unconscious. A powerful curse, disguised as the wavelength of the real king's crest, had been put into their bodies as they synchronized. King instantly realized that they were now in desperate straits. By then, however, it was already too late. The man with his face had disappeared. The king felt someone's fingers touch the back of his head. Before he knew it, he was lying on the ground as well. The leader of Zugzwang was still conscious, but it took his hazy consciousness several seconds to realize that he was beaten. He could feel the cold asphalt on his right ear. With his left turned skyward, he could hear the man's dispassionate voice. I see. Use some interesting magecraft. I mean, dividing your crest to make yourself king of your own colony. What a strange coincidence. Okay, who's this, I wonder? At that point, a carefree voice sounded from behind the strange muttering man, relieving the tense atmosphere. Everything okay? Wow, it looks like it went perfectly. Perfectly copying memory. This must be, Berserker, yeah. Perfectly copying memories is difficult, but I can at least read superficial ones and establish routines. Of course, with a mage of his caliber, I could reproduce his art completely. Berserker, it's not polite to say that in front of him. My apologies. It seems that this man's personality is rather arrogant. More importantly, did you almost just blurt out my true name? Berserker. When the mage come assassin, not that he uses that as his magic. It means turned. When the mage come assassin... That's right, I'm a come assassin. No. When the mage come assassin heard the young man, young enough to be called a boy, say that word, he understood. This apparently was what had dealt with Zugzwang, what had dealt with Zugzwang in one fell stroke. One of the beings that, in the Grail War ritual, was called heroic spirits. The king also judged that the boy must be their target, Flat Escardos. A total failure. They didn't even give us a chance to get started. So this is a heroic spirit. He understood that he was about to meet his doom. Could he possibly turn the situation around? He racked his brains for a way, both as a mage and as an experienced hitman. In his present condition, however, it was clear that there was nothing he could do. With the curse gnawing at his body, he could not even speak to beg for his life. Any chance would most likely come when they interrogated him about his employer. Still, without his pawns, what could he do against a mage who commanded this heroic spirit? I see. This is the Holy Grail War. If it encourages greater magecraft at this level, I suppose that as a mage, I ought to approve of it. Unable to even take his own life, the king prayed that his death would be as painless as possible. Then a weirdly carefree conversation reached his ears. Well, master, what should we do with them? For now, let's tie them up and toss them in the spare room we rented. Although with 9 extra guests, do you think we should rent 1 more? We can squeeze them in. I'll carry them. You wait here. Don't worry about keeping people away. I'll reinforce the ward these people set and use that. Master and servant spoke like they were having an idle chat. The king struggled to roll his eyeballs, which he could just barely move upward, and saw a young man and a man who looked exactly like himself. The next instant, however, the man with his face seemed to vanish, and a large, muscular man, more than 2 meters tall, appeared in his place. The big man lifted all 8 pawns, then reached out a hand for the king, who ended up being carried off with his subordinates. Several minutes later, Zugzwang's king had been shoved into a motel room. There he discovered that not one of his pawns were dead. Why is he letting them live? You'd only need to spare a few if he wanted to torture them for information. Don't tell me he's turning human bodies into mana crystals, like they say the Scratio family does. Hey, we understand that now. Recalling the rumors he had heard of that inhumane system made the king break out in a cold sweat. Yeah, that's kind of an awful thing. Now that he looked, there were several other mages lying around the room apart from him as pawns. He must be thinking they must also be mages who specialize in espionage and assassin when he heard the blonde boy knock. Hey, hello! Sorry for treating you all roughly. You seem kind of murderous, so I had Berserker capture you. If any of you are mages who just happen to be passing by or anything like that, well, I'm terribly sorry. Vladiscardo seemed distressed to see the mages were glaring suspiciously in his direction. What should we do, Berserker? He asked the big man beside him. They all seem on edge. Could you turn into something to help him relax? Like a child or maybe a clown? The big man, Berserker, grunted and vanished. In his place, a young girl appeared. Okay, he keeps turning into the frickin', like, the Apocrypha, Jack. We talked about this. Why do you keep ending up that bathing suit thing when you turn into a child? Vlad hastily covered the girl in a nearby bedsheet. It just always happens, Berserker replied. I find being this girl kind of reassuring. I also end up wanting to dissect things, though, so I think it's a bad idea. There's nothing reassuring about it. Now just turn back before you dissect someone or the police see you. See, everyone's giving you weird looks. That's really funny. I'm happy that this feels like the author calling out the character designer, being like, come on, why are you so weird? The mages, who were bound with magically sealing packing tape, oh my god. Does FedEx allow for that? Started shaking as they saw the Berserker take the girl's form. They did not know why, but they seemed to be shivering with an instinctive primal terror. Berserker gave a childish grunt, then vanished again, reappearing as a young man whose features marked him as English nobility. How about this? Berserker telepathically addressed Flat. Something linked to the English aristocracy of my time. As with the girl, this form helps to put me at ease. One of the most prominent theories of my true identity. In this form, I have not an urge so much to dissect people, but to, well, defile their very souls. Flat nodded and replied in kind. It's possible that you're more stable when your form matches a plausible theory of your identity. Try not to let those urges get the better of you, though. If I ever become so irrational, it's likely that my very saint graph will change and I will cease to be a berserker. If that does come to pass, use a command seal to force me to take my own life, understand? Jack, that is my humble request, Master. I do not wish my identity to be determined so imperfectly. Vlad neither agreed nor denied the request. He instead addressed the mages in an attempted dodge to help out the conversation. How about I introduce you? That's Lexarm, lying in front of the shower, Kochef in front of the refrigerator, and Decale in front of the sofa. Person in the corner with black hair, bleached blonde, is Sagara. Then the 9 people who just got here together are, Flat-asked Berserker, who answered based on the superficial memories he had copied. Just call them Zugzwang. They're 9 people with a single soul. Right! Zugzwang it is! We'll be leaving the motel now, so I'll set the seals on each of you to break simultaneously this evening. It'd be a problem if you started killing each other or anything like that, so I'll keep your magic circuits sealed for about 3 days. Wow! Wow, that's a plan. Seal their magic circuits. The words that the boy spoke so lightly caused the cautious mages to furrow their brows, as to his apparent intention to spare their lives. Master, will that not leave Zugzwang at an advantage? There are 9 of them. Oh, yeah, in that case, let's put the other 4 in the room we've been using and set their seals to break 30 seconds earlier. I think that should be enough of a time difference for them to get away if they want. Hearing Flat's cheerful voice seemed, if anything, to make the scowling mages angry. Angry at the reality that someone who lacked any and all resolve as a mage had rendered them powerless simply by acquiring the weapon known as a heroic spirit. That emotion, however, quickly turned around. Berserker saw the mages glaring at Flat. "Master?" he asked, stroking his chin. "Is it really safe to spare them? Do you want to kill them that badly?" "No, it's true that we are fated to battle to the death. In fact, I almost feel as if I've killed them several times in the past." Were they an Apocrypha? Were they an Apocrypha thing that I just missed because Apocrypha goes so fast? Zugzwang Fate. Let's see here. They are in Apocrypha. Yeah, they were subordinates of the Millennia, directly under Darnik. Tasked with investigating, tracked down Reika. The pawns were okay. So yeah, no, they were okay. Right, these were killed by assassin in Apocrypha. Okay, that makes sense. If they didn't write this in, right, it feels like I've killed them several times in the past. If they didn't write that in, I would have missed that because I'll be honest, a lot of Apocrypha didn't stick with me. I watched it pretty early, and I don't love Apocrypha. So, anyways, it's true that we have fated a battle to the death. In fact, I almost feel as if I've killed them several times in the past. But that was likely in a world on a different phase or some sort of tremor in the world. I will obey my master. Still, is there any reason not to kill them? We won't kill them, Jack. A human life weighs more than the earth, you know. To a mage, such words were appalling. The captives practically trembled with rage upon hearing them. What Flat said next, though, was the trigger. Until then, they had acknowledged Flat's mystical ability, but still thought of him as a spoiled rich boy who had magic circuits but lacks a mage's spirit, and a defective mage who can't get rid of human softness. It was his words and the look in his eyes in that instant that forced them to reconsider. Human lives. Human lives, these people's lives included, are valuable parts for jumping clear of the earth. His eyes. Flat's eyes, when he said that, were neither the eyes of a mage, nor those of a mere human. They were filled holes, like something had fallen out, or like they saw through everyone. When they sensed that presence, unlike anything they had ever felt before, all the mages had understood. The boy in front of them was no mere mage. He did, however, not seem to be any kind of monster or puppet. Both his body and mind were unmistakably human. Still, the mage's instincts told them that he was looking at a different destination. They could not comprehend what this man called Flat Escardo saw. Berserker had felt the same thing in the several days he had spent with Flat, but had deliberately refrained from mentioning it. He sensed that his master was not something that could be described in terms of good and evil. Oh my god, what are we setting up for him? As if to prove it, Flat continued without a shred of good or ill will. Wouldn't it be a shame and a waste to just kill them? The mages were frozen in fear. Only Berserker noticed that a tinge of something like loneliness flitted across Flat's face as he spoke. 20 hours remain until Jack's noble phantasm is. Oh my god, what's going to happen with it? And this is a long chapter. Damn, we're going to probably just do this one chapter today. The same time. Urban snowfield. A back street. Humans treat life awfully frivolously these days. I feel kind of sorry for them. Philia. Oh, is that the maid or the Einsburn? What, right? Am I wrong? I might have forgot about that. Or rather, the thing possessing Philia's body. Well, that's okay. What are we doing? Said, looking at her at a pre-dawn side street slightly removed from the skyscraper district. It had about as much traffic as one would expect, but its atmosphere was hardly one of safety. Frivolously? The response came from a timid-looking female mage walking behind Philia. Philia shrugged at her faint-hearted demeanor and continued. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick look. I'm going to type in Philia Fate just to make sure this is what I'm thinking of. The Einsburn Homunculus. Yes, okay. Sounds good. We got that. Just want to make sure that. Philia shrugged at her faint-hearted demeanor and continued. Yes, they're being wasteful. Or perhaps I should say they're living fast and recklessly. There's nothing wrong with basking in a moment's pleasure, but why don't they enjoy the moment more fully? Philia's gaze rested on a rowdy group of drunken men, as well as the hard-faced hoodlums who seemed of a piece with the what? Philia's gaze rested on a rowdy group of drunken men, as well as the hard-faced hoodlums who seemed of a piece with the side street. Is that a phrase to say they're a piece of something? I don't know. Those children are taking smoke of strange herbs into their bodies. Oh, weed! Weed confirmed! And those others have the vulgar stinks of their victims' blood on them. I have nothing against them getting drunk on decadence and throwing their lives away. They could at least do it more beautifully. Philia's appearance had made her conspicuous in the back streets. Her almost translucent pale silver hair swayed. Her red eyes blazed against her snow-white skin. Her features were too well proportioned to the point of seeming almost artificial, but the vivid emotions now on her face, presumably due to the influence of whatever was animating her body, lent it a human quality. Hey there, girls. If you're at this place at this hour, you must be... You're in the way. I didn't hear any dirty words, so I'll pardon you. Now go away, or die. Rough-looking men had called out to her a number of times. Just one look from her, however, and they collapsed, foaming at the mouth. The girl mage, walking behind her, knew why. The unbelievably dense magical energy that coated Philia had been focused to the point that even ordinary humans without magical circuits could feel it, and directly jolted the hoodlum's brains. Is it odd mana? Some principle that doesn't conform to either concept? Sensing the torrents of magical energy whirling around Philia, the girl mage was seized by fear. She could detect that an immense quantity of magical energy was covering Philia. The truly terrifying thing, however, was that it remained within a roughly 3-meter radius around her, forming a hemisphere dome of magical energy. What was more, absolutely no energy leaked out of that dome. The girl could tell that a mystical force was circulating, like a miniature star with Philia at its core. The being in front of her was no mage. Philia, an Einsburn homunculus. The girl had been briefed about her beforehand. Now, however, she was being distinct from homunculus, mages, and even ordinary heroic spirits, retaining only Philia's outward appearance. You too, Haruhi. The thing in Philia's form addressed the girl mage, who cowered in the face of the complete unknown. Self-sacrifice magecraft wasn't uncommon in my age, but at least sacrifice yourself like you're enjoying it. It just hurts watching you. Okay. Haruhi is that girl that we saw from the beginning there, and she's quite young, okay? And then we have the Einsburn homunculus here, who, okay. The girl mage, Haruhi, shivered at Philia's words. She felt that her inner self had been seen through. Haruhi Borzak. She was a rogue mage who did not belong to the clock tower, but her skill in witchcraft. Ooh, witchcraft. That's interesting. Now that could either be, now here's the thing, I've learned this because I've been helping with the translation of Prototype, the retranslation. You should go read volume 1, by the way. It's out now. Thing I've learned is that witchcraft has 2 different definitions. Witchcraft could be black magic, which is what is done in, we see that in Prototype fragments there. But it could also be what we get with Alice, right? Now, I'm going to think if they're talking about self-sacrifice, this might be the one for black magic as seen from what is in Prototype. But we'll see. Francesca had found her on the verge of attempting a mystical approach to the United States in pursuit of a certain goal. Yeah, witchcraft demands sacrifice. Yeah, we got that here. So that's what it is. It's black magic. Haruhi was a maverick who invariably offered only her own flesh and blood. Seems pretty rough. She also worked no deadly curses, but made up for it by specializing in reflecting them. Her magical abilities could be said to be of a high order. Although she took pride in being an accomplished mage and in using magecraft, a certain circumstance led to her to maintain a powerful hatred of the magical world. She had accepted Francesca's deal for a chance to destroy it. If she managed to obtain the Holy Grail, she planned to use its power to render all concealment deliberately maintained by Magic Society ineffective. Oh. Uh-oh. The awareness of the general populace ought to weaken mystery and leave mages distant from the origin. She might even wish for the concept of magecraft to disappear. That was the intention with which she had entered the Grail War, but she'd been handed the strange fate of being almost fatally wounded by the berserker she summoned, and was saved by the thing that possessed Philia's body. Oh, was she the one who summoned Berserker, not Edison, Berserker, yeah, Edison, right? Okay. That was how she ended up walking along a dangerous side street before dawn. An accomplished mage had no reason to fear a hoodlum or two. Assuming they had specialized in combat, a mage of sufficient stature to receive the clock tower rank of Pride or Brand would make nothing of a whole gang or even a small detachment of a regular army. It was even said that an exceptionally small portion of mages who mastered the art of combat were capable of taking on the army of a small country alone and barehanded. Haruhi, however, while an accomplished mage, was totally unsuited to direct combat. Using familiars, she might be able to drive off around 100 ruffians. If she was suddenly knifed from behind in the wrong place, however, even taking the restorative capabilities of her magic crest into account, that would help with self-sacrifice. You have no choice but to accept death. Ordinarily, her servant would have acted as her spear and shield. The heroic spirit she summoned, however, was a berserker and had therefore lost its reason. She was not sure as to what extent it would obey her instructions. However, Haruhi stared at Philia. Whatever was inhabiting the homunculus had easily restrained Berserker, treating it almost like a puppy. Although Haruhi had succeeded in sealing a former contract due to Philia's mediation, Haruhi could not consider the servant she summoned as her own. She turned her gaze upward, and there it was, following them, the eerily robotic, heroic spirit, like a cross between a mechanical spider and a lion, had not even dematerialized. It was crawling along the sides of buildings like a giant spider out of a movie, and yet Haruhi could sense nothing like magical energy from it. It did not seem to make noise either, and there was no sign of panic on the part of the people inside the buildings it crawled on. "Don't worry," Philia, swelling with pride, told the doubtful Haruhi. "His presence and form are completely isolated. I've made it so that only you and I can see him." Philia spoke offhandedly, but Haruhi, who understood what a feat that was, felt a renewed fear of the being in front of her. A full day had passed since their meeting, and Haruhi still had no idea of her true identity or objective. Although the wounds she had suffered in summoning Berserker had healed thanks to Philia, Haruhi had holed up in her workshop in order to repair her lost mystic codes and damaged magic circuits, and more importantly, to gather information on the area. At some point during that, Philia had disappeared. She returned during the night, grumbling that she spent the day observing all sorts of countries out of curiosity. What? But that they were kind of boring for how flashy they are. Huh? Although, she added, taking Haruhi's hand and dragging her outside, there are a lot of things I could praise them on, compared to my time. Haruhi was unassertive and had difficulty speaking up, but gathered her courage to ask, where are we going? To where the other servants are, obviously. What? Haruhi was dumbfounded. The sight seemed to confuse Philia. You're fighting a Holy Grail war, aren't you? I'm just giving you a little hand to help with. My goal matches yours anyway. Are you planning to march into another master's base? Yes, right up ahead. The place with the rows of grimy factories that have nothing but size going for them. Although, I'd rather steer clear of any place that reeks with so much smoke. Whatever was inhabiting Philia let out a little sigh, and looked up at the dawn sweeping across the sky and muttered to herself, I can't let to see my garden get filthy. I'll have to wash it off soon. My garden. My garden. Is this a Japanese heroic spirit? Talking about Japan, but they said go around the world, so I don't know who. Oh my god, this chapter is so long! At the same time, a police station. Orlando Reeve, the head of the Snowfield Police Department, had cut off sharing his senses with his servant Castor. He did not use his servant for reconnaissance and felt no need to provide Castor with information from his end. Consequently, the chief of police never viewed his servant's mental world or memories in the forms of dreams and considered such things unnecessary. He summoned the fake Castor, Alexandre Dumas, père, who is currently engaged in the production or falsification of noble phantasms at a remote site. Because they did not share senses, they could not communicate telepathically. Generally, they contacted each other by phone. A day had passed since Assassin's attack. The chief and other members of the police faction were finally getting back on their feet when a new order erupted. News of the epidemic affecting pets and psychological disorder that caused people to suddenly declare that they could not leave the city, which were causing panic throughout Snowfield, reached the chief's ears. He was under pressure to sort through the data, but as both one of the masterminds of the Grail War and as a police officer tasked with preserving public order. He was still in the middle of that when his cell phone alerted him to an incoming call from Dumas. "Hey bro, you picked up quick. Pulling an all-nighter?" Something like that. I haven't had a decent night's sleep since I summoned you. Ha! If you got time to complain, why not summon Hippolyte Durand while you're at it? He built my place, you know. Of course, it's somebody else's nowadays. The Chateau de Monte Cristo. Ever heard of it? Of course, it's now a monument to you. A mansion that was almost a small castle in the Ile-de-France region. That's interesting. That might be interesting to go visit, honestly. I might have another thing on my list of things that'd be interesting to see. The opulent mansion on the banks of the Seine, which Dumas had poured his whole fortune at the height of his success in a building, which can be described as an index of the author's splendor at his peak. Yeah, I looked it up and it was a real surprise. Who'd have thought the house I sold off when I hadn't got a sued? When I haven't got a sued? What's a sou? You mean a soul? I don't know. That's what? Who'd have thought that the house I sold off when I hadn't got a soul? I think. What is a sou? I'm gonna type that in. I'm confused. It's a weird. Let me see here. SOU. Oh! It's literally the old French payment. French soul. Okay, well that explains that. God, I'll say, maybe I'm just used to reading other translations, but these ones are really good, and any mistakes are mistakes on my part. Who'd have thought the house I sold off when I hadn't got a soul would still be around in this day and age, much less end up a museum of me. You have enduring fans of your work to thank for that. You got that right. I don't know about including a portrait of my mistress, but hey, works, house, and mistress are all out of my hands now. I guess they were worth making if somebody could get a kick out of them. Works and house aside, modern values don't think much of having mistresses. Well, anyway, Castor continued, ignoring the chief's sarcastic interjection. My friends took to calling my writing studio on the grounds there the Chateau d'If, if you can believe it. Not very nice to call the room where a writer shuts himself up to focus a prison island, but I bet my efficiency would go up a lot there. I hope you're not suggesting we shuttle noble phantasms back and forth between this city and France. Honestly, it's more than 130 years since I kicked the bucket. I expect you to at least come up with one machine to transport things instantly by now. Instant transportation between here and France wouldn't even be magecraft anymore. I would have one foot in the realm of magic. Okay, this is crazy, because we just had a character saying they were warping around. That's so good. That's good writing. At that point, the chief was struck by a sudden thought. Still, you must have had quite an attachment to that book to name your own house, the Chateau de Monte Cristo. Or did people just decide to start calling it that on their own? Who knows? I've got a feeling I had it called that as an insinuation aimed at somebody, but I never came to complain in my lifetime. Doesn't make much difference now, does it? It was rare for Dumas to avoid a subject so openly. Chief was exasperated, but he decided to go along with it. He repented dragging the small talk on too long. So, what are you calling about? Hey, you of your guys got their noble phantasms smashed up fighting that bloodsucker, right? I've made plans to fix them. That's lucky. As always, the courier. Stop right there. I don't need any couriers. There's somebody I want you to send instead. Chief furrowed his brow at Tomas' suggestion. I assume this isn't your usual request for a woman? Yeah. Bring that police force you picked out, Clan Calatin, over to my place. Doesn't have to be all of them, but as many old hands as possible. Oh, and include the ones with broken noble phantasms. Same for the ghost of the boy who got his hand eaten. The chief's proposal gave the chief pause. He made Tomas' existence common knowledge among Clan Calatin, but he did not immediately decide whether he could allow them to meet in person. A few days earlier, the chief would have deemed it unnecessary, and Tomas would have shown no desire to meet his men. Under the present circumstance, however, he did want to change. I believe you told me you don't require assistance to produce noble phantasms. That's right. It wouldn't make the noble phantasms any stronger. And to hell with compatibility when it comes to plain old humans. Fine-tuning's for the users, not my job. Before the chief had a chance to ask, why then, flippant Tomas gave his answer. I'm just a spectator this time. I'm doing the bare minimum for you to cover my ticket fee. Only as a spectator. If there's an actor I take a shine to, I want to show my favor for picking out a bouquet or two. Chief mulled over Tomas's words for a short moment, and then heaved a big sigh. After a few more seconds of silence, he made up his mind. All right. They're my officers before they're mages. Promise me that you won't do anything to their magic circus or anything, right? I'm not some mage like Elphus Levi or Paracelsus, you know? Do you think I can put off something that tricky? Okay, who's that? Who's that? I'm looking this up. Who's Elphus Levi? Born Alphonse Louis Constant. Was a French esotericist, poet, and writer. Initially pursued an ecclesiastic career in the Catholic Church, abandoned priesthood in mid-20s, and became a ceremonial magician. He began professing a knowledge of the occult. I've never heard of this guy. Many authors influenced Levi's political, occultic, and literary development, such as French monarchist Joseph de Maistre, Paracelsus, Robert Flood, Swedenborg. That sounds like a fate thing. Oh god, we're really going into stuff. Okay. Alright, we're going crazy. Leaving aside that opinions are split whether M. Levi was the kind of mage the association would acknowledge. Yeah, because like, what, he's apparently a magician. What does that mean? The basis of producing a noble phantasm is grafting a legend onto a weapon. You're not talking like a man who can manage something that tricky. Well, there's a chance I might mess with their destinies. You haven't let that much slide. I'll do my best to make sure I twist them for the better. Chief was about to give the shameless Tomas some candid advice, but he resisted the urge and quickly ended the call. Okay, it's him. Sorry, something just came up. I'll contact you later to know when I'll be sending my people over. Ha! No rest for you, huh, bro? Better keep some stomach medicine on hand. Man, it's crazy how many kinds there are these days. Take care of your stomach, okay? Later. After hanging up, the chief glanced to his side. His personal secretary, also a member of Clan Calatin, was standing there holding out a report. The chief nodded wordlessly, then reread the document. It was said that the Einsburn homunculus that appeared in the city was acting in concert with the mage Francesca had brought, with the master of one of the true servants. What worried him most was their reported destination. The chief had been informed in advance about the masters that Francesca and Faldius had brought in as their pawns. Kashra, who was supposed to summon Saber, had died at the assassin's hands. The magecraft using mercenary Sigma was only in contact with Faldius. Doris Lucendra, the scion of a clan that commanded reinforcement magecraft, were said to have discarded even the concept of humanity, was also outside the police surveillance net. The result was that Haruhi, who they did have under their surveillance, was of extreme importance to the chief. Her acting together with the Einsburn homunculus, however, was troubling. She brainwashed or threatened? No, considering Haruhi Borzak's origins, it's possible she made a deal and changed sides. Haruhi herself was not a powerful combat mage, so she would not present too great an issue. He would need precautions against deadly curses and the like, but such threats were not exclusive to her, so he already had several layers of countermeasures in place. The problem was the heroic spirit she had summoned. Data on the Masters had come down from above, but it would not have... Data on the Masters had come down from above, but had not included who would summon what heroic spirit. He supposed that, from the higher-ups' perspectives, even Clan Calatin fell within the category of expendable pawns. The chief did, however, at least have a firm grasp on where the masters he needed most to be wary of had made their hideouts. He was able to infer that Haruhi and the Einsburn homunculus were headed for one of them. The industrial district. Are they planning to make contact with the devil of the Scratio family? The man called himself Basilot Corleone made a conscious decision not to dream. He employed self-hypnosis to put his body into a light sleep and his brain into deep sleep for mere minutes at a time. It was a measure that enabled him to remain active for long periods, as well as to move immediately as he woke up should an enemy appear. Short-time sleep utilizing the deconstruction of consciousness was a simple spell, widely used by even amateurs. Although, as the deconstructing of one's consciousness was something like temporary suicide, only a limited number of mages made frequent use of it. Basilot had heard that there were magecraft using mercenaries who employed a number of additional sleep spells for various purposes. He, however, fundamentally disliked dreams, and therefore refused to allow himself REM sleep. That was what made Basilot suspicious. From a certain moment onward, he was conscious that he was dreaming. A sunset-stained sea spread out before him. He dreamt that he was riding on an enormous ship that made a show of parting the white-capped waves as it advanced across the water's golden surface. Okay, this is the Argo. Almost immediately, however, he revised that thought. This was no dream. It was a shared memory phenomenon, composed of information and magical energy that were not his own. His point of view was significantly higher than he was used to. Looking down, he could see a blond man who began speaking to him with a haughty grin. Huh? You want to know I don't fear you? Why even ask something so obvious? It's because I'm a sage who possesses wisdom that surpasses that of even the gods. Most likely, these were memories of the servant he was supplying with magical energy, Alcides. Cool-headed observation told Basilot that the man was speaking in some ancient language of the region around the Aegean Sea, possibly due to modern knowledge bestowed upon by the heroic spirit, or possibly due to his own influence through the past that linked them, however. His brain registered it as language he could understand, he ordinarily used. The owner of the memory, presumably Alcides, stood on the deck of a ship whose construction was too magnificent to seem ancient. A number of people were visible in the vicinity. Even in the shared memory, Basilot could tell that every one of them was cloaked in a magical energy of almost frightening intensity. If the average human shared these memories, Basilot thought, that alone would be enough to cause them mental disruption. You see, humans are fundamentally brainless. The fools choose a fool to lead them and act the king, so the country is never at rest, wars break out, and the people starve. That's precisely why a person like me has to seize power and glory. As far as power went, however, he could not sense as strong a presence from the blond man making the speech in front of him as from the others, although the man did seem to be under some kind of divine protection. When Basilot sharpened his senses and carefully scrutinized him, the man almost seemed to be cloaked in magical energy that resided in the ship itself. Even the people who fear you are a bunch of hopeless fools. Because they're fools, they can't understand the monster you are. They try to use you without understanding you. So they fear you even though they sing your praise as a hero. What a vulgar bunch. They're no different from ignorant savages offering sacrifices and toting up to a man-eating wolf that's not even a monster, let alone a messenger of the gods. The man delivered his words in a clear, consistent voice. He spoke not so much as though he was drunk on his own words. He spoke not so much as though he was drunk on his own words as he did that his words were the one and only, blindingly and obvious truth. The reactions of the people around him seemed varied. Some nodded along with shining eyes, while others flashed grimaces that seemed to say, he's at it again. Near the bow, a female archer with a bestial air, that's Adelante, was eyeing the blonde man with undisguised suspicion. The man either failed to notice her look or deemed it beneath his notice because he kept talking. My country I'm gonna make, will be different. Give every citizen an education. I'll build a school in the city better than that stable and lend my knowledge to everyone. I'll be able to read and write so they won't be taken in by unscrupulous merchants. Of course, they'll never equal my wisdom, so I'll have to compensate for what they lack. A real talker, Bazelot continued to listen to the man's speech, although it made no strong impression on him. Alcides, the original listener, had lent an ear to the lengthy monologue in silence. I'm gonna be king after all. I'm prepared for that much labor. As long as everyone obeys me, I'll give them suitable compensation and a prosperous land. A land where everyone feels safe. In that land, listen to me! In that land, no one will look at you and be afraid, the blond man proclaimed, spreading his arms wide and cutting off Alcides, who had been about to say something. The gesture almost seemed to say that his words were the world itself. Because as long as you're my man, my friend, my property, everyone will understand you. I don't know if that's nice or not. At that point, Bazelot regained consciousness. Around him spread the usual, dreary expanse of his workshop beneath the meat processing plant. Bazelot noted that he was seated in a chair, then took out a pocket watch and confirmed that exactly 5 minutes had passed since he had begun sleeping. After a brief silence to consider what he had seen, he slowly voiced his conclusions. I see. So that was captain of the Argo. At that, a portion of the space in the workshop writhed, and a dense mass of magical energy materialized in human form. What do you mean by that? Alcides asked his master. Your memories encroached on my sleep. I assume due to the path of magical energy that linked us. I saw an arrogant brat on a boat spouting nonsense about his utopia. Bazelot made no attempt to conceal what he had seen or the impression he had formed of it. Alcides sank into silence for a while, and stifled a chuckle as he shook his head, apparently reminiscing about the distant past. His utopia? I doubt there's anyone else who would make such a dubious speech aboard ship. A worthless man. In this day and age, people like us would use him down to the bone marrow, then throw him away. Just an easy mark that doesn't know his place. Why would a hero of your caliber haul oars for a man like him? Bazelot dispassionately gave Alcides a character sketch and a question based on what he had seen. Alcides' response was immediate. That man was a vulgar clown with all the weaknesses and twists of human nature in him. Nor can I deny that he always told his companions that he was the one who could make the best use for them. That earned him cold looks from Adelante. Hearing the name of the huntress said to have been one of Alcides' shipmates on the Argo, Bazelot surmised that she must have been the woman in the scene he had just witnessed. But that told of the same dream equally to me, who was feared as a monster, and to the Queen of Lemos, and even to the monsters on the shore that understood human speech. He was aiming to be a king, not a god, although I doubt he made such a distinction. It was a harsh assessment, but there was no sign of scorn in his voice. He was a pitiful man who forgot the teachings of our mutual teacher Chiron and became obsessed with his own desires. Still, there was nothing false about the wild tales he spun. Alcides expounded on the man who had been the Argo's captain with the deliberate tone of a man describing a dream he once had. That man, smeared with dirt and avarice, was the most human I ever saw. If I had to lose, I wouldn't want it to be to curses, thunderbolts, or in hellfires that the gods send my way. I want my soul to be scorched by the never-ending greed of a man like that. Of a human. You almost sound like you're hoping for it. Of course I am. But after I've taken my revenge. Then, almost incidentally, he began to reminisce about that glorious ship he had crewed, the Argo. That ship was a true den of thieves. It shone brightly, but beneath it was a whirlpool of ruin, greed, and treachery. All the karma to which human beings are subject. I doubt there was anyone on board who wouldn't kill me, captain included, vice versa. Sounds like you're awfully attached to that boat. It was a half-sarcastic remark delivered in perfect deadpan. Alcides neither confirmed nor denied it. He matter-of-factly told a story of the captain's end. In the end, that man lost everything. I hear that he perished, crushed by the corpse of the ship where we share joys and sorrows. Although that may have been that fickle ship's one genuine act of mercy. Seeing Alcides deeply moved by his story raised doubts in Bazelot's mind. He's awfully talkative. I wouldn't have thought he'd be anxious to talk about the past. Alcides answered those doubts by grasping his bow and lightly planting its tip on the floor. Alcides' bloodlust swelled, sending a cold shiver through the air of the workshop in step with the expanding ripples of the sound of the impact. I've said this so much that I can justly convey the meaning of what I'm about to tell you. I would not want it said that I deal out death without reason, like those outlaws who call themselves gods. What do you want to say? Even in the face of Alcides' naked bloodlust, Bazelot remained unperturbed. In the midst of pressure so intense it might break an ordinary human's body even faster than it broke their spirit, Alcides lowered his voice and gave his master a warning. It may be true he was an incurably arrogant fool who didn't know his place, but even so, he was my friend. You were not on that ship, and I will not permit you to insult him so casually. It was a direct threat. Bazelot judged that if he made another disparaging remark about the captain, Alcides would turn on him without mercy. I see. Understood. I won't apologize, but I will promise never to bring up the subject again. After a brief silence, Alcides extinguished his bloodlust and turned his back on Bazelot. Watching his back, Bazelot understood why such a trivial conversation had traveled along the path of magical energy into his own consciousness. As far as the man called Alcides was concerned, the time he spent on that ship must have been one of the few times he was treated as a human rather than a child of a god. The only other candidates were his infancy and the time he spent frolicking with wife and child who were fated to die. Those traces of Alcides the human, standing out like stepping stones, must be all that now gave him form. How twisted. The man who had done the twisting thought without a shred of sympathy. He etched the exchange into the memory for future use. Maybe that captain really was a hero. I think this shouldn't be italicized. That's why it was a bit confusing. Bazelot revised his evaluation of the blonde man. He had seen his dream slightly upward. He was considering his future plans when the communication equipment in his workshop registered a call from the meat processing plant above ground. What is it? The subordinate mage on the first floor answered Bazelot's frosty tones with an almost scream. It's the Einsburns! An Einsburn homunculus is here, and... That was as far as the subordinates got. There was an intense burst of noise, and the call cut off with a sound like a person collapsing to the floor. Wordlessly, Bazelot rose to his feet and turned his eyes to the stairs that led above ground. Alcides appeared to have noticed that something was out of ordinary as well. There was only one presence, he muttered, bow in hand. But it seems as though there's more than one of something. Perhaps it was a hero's intuition. Perhaps it had something to do with his mind's eye. Alcides suspected that the diminutive presence he sensed and whatever had defeated Bazelot's men were separate entities. To prove it, he could soon hear the clangs of two pairs of feet descending the stairs. What appeared in the workshop several seconds later was a woman with a distinct pure white skin and pale silver hair of a homunculus, and a girl, apparently a mage, who seemed to be trying to hide behind her. At that point, Bazelot and Alcides knew. The reason that neither of them could detect even a trace of the presence of the woman who appeared to be an Einsburn homunculus was that she was forcing her magical energy to circulate only around herself. Faced with a dome of dense magical energy with a radius of several meters, Alcides wordlessly set his hands on his bow, while Bazelot spoke with a look of imperturbability. An Einsburn doll, right? What do you want here? In contrast to Bazelot, who kept almost all emotion out of his voice, the homunculus spoke with cheerfulness and a gentle smile on her face. Oh, look how muddy you've gotten. You've half stopped being human, haven't you? In that case, I don't mind if I kill you along with that warped heroic spirit there. Oh my god, we're still going. How long is this chapter? I'm just gonna look. How much? Okay, we got a bit. I'm gonna take a quick break and then we'll continue on here. Okay. Okay, we're back. Let's keep reading for now. Shouldn't take too much longer for this chapter, I hope. I have supper on the way. And we're continuing on with chapter 10. Boy, it's taken a while. That dim world was filled with the presence of dense forest. All around, giant cryptomerias rose skyward like buildings. The deep shadows of their leaves blanketed the earth, as if to say they would not permit any new buds to breathe. Amid the gloom, a deeper shadow fell. It had the color of dark earth. In reality, however, its insides were filled with dense magical energy and the radiance of life. Inside that clump of earth, which wriggled like slime mold, a number of words were being repeated. To be precise, they were not even words, they were clumps of will. The newborn dirt clod was soaking in what sort of entity it was. Pierce, and so fast. You are the all-piercing spear, and the linchpin that will so fast our truth, the world's truth. I know who we're talking about. You have the knowledge that you need to become a perfected doll, and the obligation to do so. Our first and last mercy, thrown to warn against the hubris that walks the earth. Remind the race of humans of their role. You shall guide them. Pierce and so fast, but first learn. You have a need to know what humans are. In the forest of Enlil, Utu birthed a human who was complete. Look, speak, and pattern your form after its. Then will Ninurta grant you a share of his power. Before we hurl you into the woods of Uruk, you must be with the person that Utu reared. Become perfect. Become a doll. You are the lump of earth that will imitate all life. Converse with humans. Pierce and so fast. The numerous words that reverberated from the world itself into the dirt clod's core. The clod simply existed in the shadows of the forest and searched as the words commanded. It must know humans. It must meet the complete human that Utu was said to have raised. Then, when the air of the forest grew colder, it appeared before the lump of earth. The voices within the clod swelled, and it instinctively understood that this was the complete human. The thing, it, could neither be called he nor she, that the mud became aware of, as it simply spread through the forest, raised a cry of perpetual hate and unending resentment for the whole world. In a forest. What's wrong? You sounded like you were having a nightmare. Enkidu gently stroked the back of its master, the silver wolf, as it slowly opened its eyes. Seeing the light filtering through the surrounding trees, it rubbed its head against Enkidu in relief. After it let out a number of barks, Enkidu's face grew clouded, and he addressed it in tones of heartfelt apology. I see. That must be a memory from before I was born. I'm sorry for frightening you. Enkidu quietly closed his eyes, then, recalling an age that was now long past, murmured to himself. Utu and the other gods, all except Ishtar and Ereshkigal, genuinely believed that she was a complete human being. Actually, if I hadn't met Shamat and Gil after her, I would have believed it too. The silver wolf let out a gentle keening, as if to comfort the sad-eyed Enkidu. Enkidu flashed the wolf a smile, then looked up at a starry sky slightly different from that of his own day. He spoke of the fate of the gods. At that point, it was probably already too late to stop their parting with the people of Babylonia. Crystal Hill Hotel, top floor. This still falls far short of my chamber in Uruk. Really? But it's so beautiful, Teenage Chelk exclaimed in surprise. Naturally. It came from my treasury, her servant, the King of Heroes, declared in tone of mild displeasure. All my furnishings are of the highest quality, but the atmosphere this time fails to counterbalance my treasures. To begin with, this quantity is hardly sufficient. A room such as this is too cramped to proudly display the grandeur of Uruk. The hotel suite that the King of Heroes surveyed as he spoke looked nothing like it had a few hours earlier. Although Alkidi's attack had shattered the window glass, it was still the most luxurious room in Snowfield. The furniture and bed were both of the highest quality. To Tine, used to living in an isolated desert settlement, these were things from another world. Nevertheless, the previous evening, once the King of Heroes had finished his lengthy recital of the buildings of the walls of Uruk and moved on to expounding on how perfect the city of Uruk had been, he announced his intention to redecorate. He apparently had doubts about whether Tine and his subordinates could fully comprehend the wonders of Uruk as things stood. After ordering Tine's black-suited followers to move all furnishings into the corridor, he produced Babylonian-era decorations from his own treasury. Tine stared with wide eyes at their beauty. The unrolled carpets made her imagine she was walking on clouds. Glittering tableware, the likes of which she had never seen, were arranged on a table that appeared to have been carved out of stone. Even the design of the numerous gold ornaments, which one mistake could easily send over the line into bad taste, harmonized with their surroundings. They contained a simple beauty like fields of gold grain condensed. The King of Heroes' normal armor is glitzier than any of this stuff. Oh, and no, this one, the black suits, rather. King of Heroes' normal armor is glitzier than any of this stuff, one of the black suits thought. Then, realizing it was more than their life was worth to say that out loud, they broke out in a cold sweat and forced the thought down to their innermost depths. As for the jewels, even the numerous lapis lazulis, not especially rare stone that appeared for the King of Heroes' treasury, were unlike any Tine had ever seen. The surface of these stones, enveloped in an almost transparent indigo, were flecked with glittering crystal reminiscent of white-crested waves. It made her hallucinate that an ocean was sealed inside them, and that if split open it would gush out to birth stars and life. If the King of Heroes had told her it was so, Tine would have believed him. And then the King of Heroes complained that, even adorned with enormous jewels of such beauty, it fell short. Perhaps I ought to begin at the beginning by having a royal palace. No, a city constructed. What are your thoughts, Tine? We, who are not people of Uruk, could not dare to walk the streets of such a city. Nonsense! Whether one is a person of Uruk has no bearing on whether one stands on its paving stones. The King of Heroes looked down at Tine and dismissed her words out of hand. From my perspective, all are equally mongrels. High or low birth makes less difference than a sheet of gold leaf. Those I recognize as people of Uruk are those with the will to clear the wasteland themselves. Then, perhaps recalling Uruk's inhabitants, his face softened. There was even a mongrel who rose from tavern wench to high priestess and shouted at me until I rebuilt the country, if you believe it. I shall never understand her faith in that thoughtless goddess Ishtar, but that was how one of my people ought to be. Such a person. She was not unique. All the people of Uruk struggled desperately to live, but none of them considered that hardship. Although there were those who depended on and revered me, there were no crooked people whose only skill was flattering me. Anyone who would conceive such a scheme would die a dog's death in the wastelands without even a need for me to judge them. That was the kind of age the people of Uruk lived in. When the King of Heroes, bathed in the rays of morning light that streamed in through the windows, reached that point, he turned his gaze to Tine. Perhaps she was using some form of magecraft because she was wide awake and tense despite not having a wink of sleep. I permit you to retire. King of Heroes addressed Tine in tones of mild displeasure. You were born human. Be natural when answering the demands of your instincts. His words were of appreciation for her subordinate and stopped short of just saying that he saw through her spell. But, Your Majesty, for me to indulge in indolence while Your Majesty labors without sleep would be... Then this is a royal order. Rest. It shames a king to work even a temporary retainer to death. Still, Tine hesitated. The King of Heroes wiped all expression from his face and stated, I believe I already told you. You may offer me your life, but I have no need of an immature soul. My humble apologies. When he had seen Tine vanish into the bedroom after repeatedly expressing her gratitude, the King of Heroes turned his attention to the black-suited followers who remained in the room. Tension ran through them at this behavior from the king, who ordinarily acted as if they did not exist. You have labored hard as well. It must be a burden to revere an immature girl as your lord. Of course not. We would never. The King of Heroes narrowed his eyes at the first man's forced smile. One to start. Gilgamesh, who had witnessed a great multitude of humanity as a hero, a tyrant, a wise king, and a heroic spirit, instantly recognized the man as a traitor. He did not, however, point out that fact, or even telepathically communicate it to Tine. 10 rats, I would say. But there will be more. Smirking inwardly, began to roll a cup in his palm, reflecting the morning sunlight. Well, no matter. They are Tine's followers, not my vassals. It is for her to judge the traitors, or to fail to notice them and be stabbed in the back. If you claim you are not a child, mongrel, show me the state of your mind. As your king, I shall take my time weighing its worth. Then he spoke to himself in a voice that reached no one. Mongrel, if you are merely the child I took you for, drift in your dreams for the present. Even your nightmares must be better than reality. In a dream, Kuraoka Tsubaki awoke basking in the rays of morning sunlight that streamed in through the window. Good morning, Mr. Black. The black giant that blocked out the ceiling squirmed happily at her call. Outside the window, little birds sang. In the garden beyond them, cats and dogs frolicked without fighting. Good morning, Tsubaki. Breakfast is ready. The door opened and her mom appeared. The smell of cooked bacon wafted up the stairs. Okay, morning, Mom. I'm coming. Tsubaki replied with an innocent smile. It could be called an ordinary, uneventful day for the residents of Snowfield. The curtain rose again on the everyday life that Tsubaki craved more than anything else. I thought so. Everyone must be on a trip. Once she was done eating breakfast, Tsubaki went for a walk and was playing with the animals, and noticed that the city had changed since the day before. Cars now occasionally ran along the avenues, and a scattering of people could be seen throughout the city. Tsubaki had spent most of her life cooped up in the house and knew few people apart from her family. Even so, the fact that people had vanished from the city had her at first feel nervous and afraid. Remembering that, she thanked Mr. Black, who walked in the shade again. Thank you, Mr. Black. Without you, I'd be scared and hungry. I bet I would have died. The black shadow just wobbled in response to the young girl's words. The black mass wavering in the shadow of a telephone pole on an unfrequented street looked nothing so much like the product of a horror movie, but Tsubaki grinned innocently at it and seemed to trust it completely. Tsubaki herself did not understand why she had so readily accepted the black grotesquerie. Despite her youth, no, precisely because of her youth, there would have been nothing strange about her following her instincts and embracing fear. For some reason, however, Tsubaki had never felt afraid. It was as if she sensed that she could be safe with that thing. Because she never questioned the fact herself, there was no one to consider the affinity between her and the Black Mass. Not until that day, that moment. Hey, can I pet your dogs and cats too? Tsubaki was surprised at being spoken to so suddenly. When she hurriedly spun around, there stood a boy she had never seen before. He looked a few years older than Tsubaki, though from adult perspective, they would both be considered young children. Yeah, sure. Tsubaki, well, hesitant, cheerfully accepted the boy. She had not noticed at the moment he appeared the black shadow, pale rider, had swelled up as if it was on guard, and returned to its normal size in apparent relief as soon as he smiled at the boy. The boy, on the other hand, did remark the wriggling black mass, but let out a sigh of relief when he saw it relax. Thank goodness, it's determined that I'm Tsubaki's friend. That was close. Even I can't perfectly predict the actions of a system-type servant. Oh, that's an interesting type of servant. I never even considered that. The boy thought as he stroked a dog's cheek and flashed Tsubaki an innocent grin. All right. Jester. Huh? My name's Jester Cartier. Pleased to meet you. A mage's workshop. In a dim workshop, a mastermind and her servant lay happily munching on a sweets on bed, totally unaware of two children's chance meeting in a girl's dream. These are so good. Wait, okay, no, that's the boy. These are good. Let me try some of those too. Eat too many, you'll get fat, the girl, Francesca, warned. No, I won't. I'm a heroic spirit. The boy caster, Francois Prelati, laughed boastfully, tearing open a bag of sweets. Francesca responded by puffing out her cheeks. Must be nice. What if I could become one too? Do you think if I did something incredible now in the name Francesca, I could become a heroic spirit? I think you'd probably just be integrated with me. Actually, you now and the throne copied as a heroic spirit, would be completely different entities who just happen to have the same memories, so wondering if you could become a heroic spirit is already messed up. Although I do hear exceptions who get summoned in all sorts of different eras while they're still alive. Prelati's words caused Francesca to tilt her head in puzzlement as she munched on a Japanese pastry called a dorayaki. I wonder if Artie's had some of these. Not that it matters, since she didn't turn up this time. And I just know it would have been a great jab at our masters if we got to bully her too. I see. You might be right. I hear she had a rough time at the 4th and Fuyuki, but it doesn't seem like our masters went to help her. They probably figured they didn't have to. They couldn't if they tried anyway. It'd be one thing in Britain, but there isn't enough mystery left in the world to get them to cross the ocean from that lake. For that, you'd have to peel the world's texture off, or... Oh. Now, these two are just hanging out. What are they thinking of? Although the content of the conversation was inscrutable, the pair exchanged words with the air of a chat between a young boy and girl, until the image on one of the countless monitors around them caught the boy's eye and his hand froze midway to another bag of sweets. It was one of the images showing views of the location of the mages who were Francesca's pawns, one's showing the industrial district that contained Basil Corleone's workshop. On the screen, I thought they'd list more. On the screen, one of the factory's smokestacks slowly collapsed, and an unnaturally large, grotesque silhouette was visible in the ensuing dust cloud. Oh my god. What's that? A giant monster? The big spider from the Cave of Crystals? Oh my god. We're... okay. We fought him! The boy Prelati sat up on the bed and watched it with interest. The giant grotesquerie and Alcades appeared to be engaged in combat, and a serious destruction was beginning to ripple out into the industrial district. The spider won't wake up yet. Could be the cursed cat of Britain. Who? Is this another thing that I don't know? Cursed cat of Britain? What the frick? It doesn't look like a cat or dog to me. Did somebody summon a giant or the king of the Picts? What are we doing? At that point, Francesca discovered a familiar face running away in the corner of the picture. Haruhi? Francesca could not clearly see at the distance, but the next instant looked as if the giant monster's shape moved to shield... What is this shape? Moved to shield the girl from flying rubble, blocking every piece. When she realized the pawn she had prepared was, for some reason, allowing something to rampage in Basilot's workshop, Francesca was glued to the screen with an ecstatic grin on her face. No way, for real? Wow, way to go, Haruhi. I only brought you in to fill out the roster, but you summoned something up amazing. Is that really a heroic spirit? That aside, isn't there something off about the amount of magical energy? Oh, my organs ache. I love a girl who defies expectations like that. You're the best. I've got to give you a hug and treat you to some cake or something later. Francesca, who was breathing heavily and her cheeks were flushed. Her boy-shaped servant, in contrast, protested his master in a somewhat peeved tone. Hey, can't see the screen. Then people greeted the dawn. A dawn for the participants in the Holy Grail War marked the beginning of a full-scale conflict. A dawn that, the ordinary people of Snowfield, marked the beginning of destruction. Okay. Well, damn. That was a chapter, huh? That was really good. A lot more references, but also just like really interesting stuff about each of the servants. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I'm looking forward to reading more. We got to page 55 of 162. So this might take maybe 3 videos, maybe 4. We'll have to see. Anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. We'll see you more for some more of our Let's Read a Fate's Strange Fake Volume 4 next time, guys. Ciao.
Yo.